What's happening, guys? Today I'm coming at you with nothing to do with gaming. This is actually to address all the Christians in my life. I've noticed lately here in Sydney we've been having a lot of protests, and I personally disagree with them. They're human rights protests, but our human rights are technically not breached, especially when you compare what's happening here in Sydney to what's happening in Afghanistan, or what happened in Lebanon a few years ago, or what's happening between Israel and Palestine. Our human rights are definitely not being breached. But that aside, I just really wanted to showcase my belief behind my disagreement with these people, and hopefully you guys can begin to understand why, from a Christian perspective, I completely disagree. So I just wanted to start this with a Bible verse. I got the message here just because I feel like the way it paraphrases things is much easier for a modern audience to understand. But we're going to go into Romans 13 verses 1 to 7. So here we go. Be a good citizen. All governments are under God, insofar as there is peace and order. It's God's order. So live responsibly as a citizen. If you're irresponsible to the state, then you're irresponsible with God, and God will hold you responsible. Duly constituted authorities are only a threat if you're trying to get by with something. Decent citizens should have nothing to fear. Do you want to be on good terms with the government? Be a responsible citizen and you'll get on just fine. The government working to your advantage. But if you're breaking the rules left and right, watch out. The police aren't there just to be admired in their uniforms. God also has an interest in keeping order, and He uses them to do it. That's why you must live responsibly, not just to avoid punishment, but also because it's the right way to live. That's also why you pay tax. Well, I'm not going to get into paying taxes. That's verse 6 and 7. But yeah, as you can see, right there is in the Bible. But I'm going to use a few more examples within the Bible that hopefully can open your eyes a bit more to this. So that was a lengthy piece of scripture, essentially just saying, do the right thing, follow the law. The law's there for a reason. And even if you look at our laws here in Australia are heavily influenced by things that are said in the Bible. For a long time, this country was considered a Christian country, and that's actually how a lot of the laws that we live and abide by came to be. But that aside, I really think it's a faith thing to just be able to sit there and not have to protest, knowing that God will pull you through the circumstance, whether you like the situation you're in or not. It's not up to you, because we live as Christians knowing that things happen in God's timing and not our timing, no matter how much we force them. That's part of the faith walk, and that's part of being a Christian. It's actually quite a fundamental. And as you go forward, there's many examples of people deciding not to protest and just trust God in the Bible. One of the most famous ones that I also always see carried out is the story in Daniel of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And if you're watching this and you're not a Christian and you're just, nice because you want me to get views or whatever, thank you, first of all. But second of all, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These three guys were three guys that were essentially told to be thrown in a big kiln. What happened was the king at the time, Nebuchadnezzar, said he built a giant golden statue of himself and is like, all right, everybody has to worship that statue instead of their God. But they decided, no, look, we're just going to chill. We're just going to be living our lives as we normally would, but we're only going to pray to our God, right? Being God, capital G. So, king finds out about it. He grabs them. They say in Daniel 3 verse 16, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not defend ourselves before you. Verse 17, if we're thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve will save us, and He will rescue us from your power. Right? That's what they say. That's their response. We won't defend ourselves. And then the story goes on. When they're getting thrown into the furnace, the people lighting the furnace are dying from heat exhaustion from being next to the furnace. That's how hot it is. But they get thrown in and they don't die. That's the story. That's the biblical story. You can read it for yourself. It's in Daniel chapter 3. Go for it. It's good fun. So the next thing that I'll bring up is also in the book of Daniel. So what goes on here is you got Daniel himself, the person the book is named after. And this is a guy who essentially becomes a politician, gets high up there with the king of the region, King Darius, and other people get jealous. So what they do is they kind of like trick the king into making a law that will essentially just chuck Daniel into prison. Right? Now, I know myself, I would be furious if someone did that to me. And, well, it wasn't even prison. It was the lion's den. It was a den of man-eating lions, like that they were literally just used to feed men to lions. Pretty rough stuff, right? But anyway, you get to verse 10, right? They make the law, Daniel 6 verse 10. But when Daniel learned the law had been signed, he went home, knelt down as usual in his upstairs room. With the windows open towards Jerusalem, he prayed 3 times a day, right? He went home and he prayed. Later on, it says, right, they caught him praying because that was the crime, whatever. He was praying in his own home. They caught him praying. They took him to the lion's den. It doesn't record any fighting. It doesn't record any other dialogue on Daniel's bit. All he did was pray. Now, the next time that we get any dialogue from Daniel is in verse 21, right? So at this point, they've kept him in overnight in the lion's den. And the kings asked him, "Hey, Daniel, are you there? Did God rescue you from the lions?" His first response in verse 21 is, "Long live the king," right? So he made it out without protesting. You see where I'm going with this? In fact, really, from biblical figures, the closest thing we have to actual protesting comes in Matthew 26, right? Matthew 26, verses 39. I'm just going to read verse 39, right? So in verse 39, Jesus is praying in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he says, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me." He doesn't want to go through the crucifixion. Yet I want your will to be done, not mine. There it is again. Lack of resistance, because God's will is greater than our will, and his plans are greater than our plans. As a Christian, I feel like these are fundamental things that we should know and we should realize and we should hold on to. So what happens when the protest does begin? Peter, good old mate Pete, bloody Mr. Walk on Water himself, comes out, he brings out a sword, cuts off a guy's ear. Jesus is like, whoa, 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 what you doing? What are you doing? Now this is going back down further to verse 52. Jesus says, "Put away your sword, for those who live by the sword will die by the sword." And if you want to read that passage in any of the other gospels, there are actually also accounts where it says the centurions came up and asked Jesus if he is Jesus, and he responds with, "I am," which then in turn knocks everybody out. So everybody's out cold. Jesus has just used the power of him saying "I am" to knock everyone out, but then he goes on to wait so that he can be arrested, and that is absolutely incredible. And the reason I really think that we should pay attention to this in and of itself, Jesus didn't protest here, is because we call ourselves Christians. Christians, derived from the Greek Christianos. Christianos means little Christ or copy of Christ. And I really want to know, are you a Christian now? Are you a copy of Christ? Are you doing what he would have done, the way that he would have done it, with the compassion that he would have had to do it with? Right? Do you understand that there's no answer? God has all the answers, but we don't have the answers for everything. But sometimes we don't need answers. Sometimes you just need to be there for the people around you. When Lazarus died, Jesus could have done any manner of miracles to get there on time. He could have left early. He got the news, and then he went and he had dinner and he had a sleep, and then he went the long way. So Lazarus was still alive at this point. But then he died and he got there, and there were people crying, his family members crying. And instead of giving them some sort of long-winded explanation or excuse, he sat there with them. Guys, and there are people in our lives right now who just need us to sit there with them. They don't need us to give them explanations of things. They don't need to hear us harp on. They just need to know that we are there. And it's easy to be distant mentally or even spiritually when you're in a pandemic and when you're stuck at home and when there's nothing that you can do and you feel trapped. But as Christians, we believe that God is good, God only does good, and He can use anything in your circumstance and turn it around for good. And if you believe that, then why would you take matters into your own hands to go to a protest? I'm gonna leave it there because and I'm actually not gonna respond to anything in the comments, but I really feel that we all need to think about this and evaluate this and come at this knowing more about ourselves and knowing more about God. So if you dislike this, put an angry face, I don't care. If you like it, put a love heart, put a like, whatever. Whatever platform this goes up on, I'm not even sure where I'm uploading this to, but maybe we'll do some more of these, who knows.